Chapter 525. Nanny Deng. You've been with Mother for so long, you must have figured out Mother's character. Tell me, why did she suddenly enter the palace to see Lu Qingru? This servant doesn't know. Logically speaking, Madam and concubine Ru of Huiyang Palace didn't have much interaction. When Jiyu Yuqin was still alive, she didn't like Lu Qingru in every possible way. But because the Lu family was still alive, she didn't cause too much trouble for her. Since Jiyu Yuqin's death, Lu Qingru was also a stranger to them. They didn't care about her. But today, she suddenly entered the palace and went to Huiyang Palace. Is Mother regretting it? Concubine. A trace of mockery appeared on her beautiful face. Jiyu Yuyin smiled coldly, and the corner of her mouth curved into a sarcastic smile. She must be regretting that she treated Jiyu Yuqin like that, regretting that she killed Jiyu Yuqin for me. How about it? Nanny Deng, her heart is indeed biased. In her heart, she still favors that bitch. But, doesn't she think it's too late to regret it now? Jiyu Yuqin is already dead, she's already dead. What's the use of her regret now? She's just making me hate her for no reason. Concubine, you can't think like that. You know, Madam always has her own reasons for doing things. Maybe what? She's clearly Empress. Someone from Huiyang Palace is here. Because of the little eunuch's report, Jiyu Yuyin temporarily stopped speaking and looked at the little eunuch who was kneeling on the ground. Huiyang Palace? It's Lu Hui who serves concubine Ru. The whole Huiyang Palace was so big, but there was only one master and one servant. Lu Qingru was grounded in Huiyang Palace, so naturally, she couldn't come in person. In other words, it could only be her servant. Jiyu Yuyin smiled coldly. She really came at the right time. I was thinking of asking her personally, but I didn't expect that she would send someone over and let her in. Yes. After Lu Hui came in, she looked at Jiyu Yuyin who was sitting on the high seat. She didn't bow and just stood there. I'm here on her ladyship's orders to pass a few words to the Empress. Jiyu Yuyin didn't care about her rudeness at all. She raised her eyebrows calmly and said, "Speak." Presumably, Empress also knows that today, Lady Murong has entered the palace to pay her respects to her ladyship. Sure enough, Jiyu Yuin's expression turned ugly when she heard Lu Hui's words that were neither servile nor overbearing. However, she quickly regained her composure and looked at Lu Hui condescendingly like an ant. Yes, I've only just learned of Mother's visit to concubine Ru. Then, she continued, Father and Mother had some conflicts because of trivial matters in the mansion. Mother was grounded by Father, but she didn't listen to Father and sneaked into the palace. I was talking to Nanny Deng about this. Stop. Lu Hui had only taken 2 steps when she heard Jiyu Yuin's angry voice. She stopped in her tracks. You're just a lowly servant girl. What do you take my auspicious Harmony Palace as? Is this a place where a lowly servant like you can come and go as you please? Since this servant has come, naturally I have made complete preparations. The Empress is narrow-minded and refuses to let this servant go. I'm afraid that if this gets out, the magnanimous Empress would argue with a lowly servant. Isn't that too inappropriate? Now that the Empress punishes me, I'm afraid. Shut up. Why didn't he know that this little slut had a sharp tongue before? She didn't even have the energy to retort. Because everything she said was reasonable, she couldn't find a reason to refute. That was right. She was right. The 100 lives of the Lu family had always been a knot in the hearts of the capital city's common people. The Lu family had worked hard and had never made any mistakes. They helped the new emperor ascend the throne and were loyal and devoted, but because of Lu Qingru, they were executed by the emperor. It could be said that Lu Qingru's every move in the inner palace was under their noses, including her, the only surviving servant girl of the Lu family. If anything were to happen to her in Xionghe Palace, then the one who would be criticized by the public would be her, the empress of the Jiyu family. The virtuous and generous reputation that she had painstakingly built up would be gone. Perhaps even the tragic death of Jiyu Yuqin would be brought up again by people who would add oil to the fire. Chapter 528. Jiyu Yuyin was indeed well protected by the Jiyu family, But it didn't mean that she didn't know anything. She more or less understood the logic behind it. This Lu Hui had predicted this, so she dared to come over and say these words to her. Lu Qingru had also predicted that she wouldn't dare to touch this slut, so she let her come over with ease. Jiu Yuerin's expression was extremely ugly, but she couldn't say anything at this moment, let alone let Deng Mommy punish her. She could only watch helplessly as Lu Hui walked away, but there was nothing she could do. She gritted her teeth in hatred. Lu Hui's smug look was undoubtedly a show of strength in front of her. Jiu Yuyin was certain that no matter how excessive Lu Hui's words were, no matter what she did in front of the Empress, she couldn't touch her. Your Highness, are you going to let this slut go just like that? If I don't let her go, what else can I do? Kill her. Didn't you hear what she said before she left? She knew that I can't touch her, so she dared to show off in front of me. Jiu Yuerin's face was livid with anger, but she couldn't find a place to vent it. Even the things that could be smashed in Xionghe Palace had been smashed by her long ago. Mother was right, she liked to smash things when she encountered trouble. Apart from smashing things, she was useless. She said she couldn't compare to Jiu Yuqin, couldn't compare to that slut Jiu Yuqin. She said that she wasn't a virgin at all. Since she thought she was good, why did she kill her in the first place? Now that Jiu Yuqin was dead, she treated her like this because of a dead person. Jiu Yuyin clenched her fists tightly. Deng Mommy, did you see that? Mother is treating me like this because of a dead person. Does she still have any place for me as a daughter in her heart? She went to Lu Qingrou's palace to get Jiu Yuqin's belongings. What about me? What does she think I am? I'm a living person in front of her, but now it's like I don't exist. Since that's the case, why did she still, Your Highness? You can't just say a few words from Lu Hui. Are you trying to absolve her again? Do you think that I'm being unreasonable? Every time something like this happens, you always say that mother has her reasons. Then tell me, Jiu Yuqin has been dead for so long, but she suddenly ran into Lu Qingrou's bedroom to ask for her belongings. You didn't even tell this Empress about this matter, yet you told me. What is her intention this time? Her Majesty, I finally understand now. She has finally realized the importance of that woman in her heart. She doesn't even care about my feelings anymore. Lu Hui is right. She doesn't like me now. Perhaps in the future, she will push all the blame for that slut Jiu Yuqin's death onto me. Perhaps she even plans to pull me down from the position of Empress. Your Highness, you mustn't think like that. That Lu Hui is someone by concubine Ru's side. Chapter 529. She, Murongyun, regretted it. She regretted killing her own daughter for me. She regretted framing Jiu Yuqin and pulling her down from the throne of the Empress to help me become the Empress. She wants to pull me down from the throne of the Empress again and treat me like how she treated Jiu Yuqin. I treated her as my mother and respected her so much that I didn't dare to disobey her. Does she think that I should listen to her like how Jiu Yuqin did so that she would be satisfied? Your Highness, you've misunderstood Madam. How could you think of Madam this way when she was so nice to you? Moreover, the late Empress is already dead. How could Madam regret it? Even if she did, the late Empress would never wake up. Granny Deng knew that Jiu Yuyin was extreme when she was in the Jiu family. To be honest, she liked Jiu Yuqin more than the willful and reckless Jiu Yuyin. It was a pity that Jiu Yuqin was not favored at that time. No matter how kind and obedient she was, servants like them could only listen to their masters. No one dared to treat her well. Not only did Madam regret it, Granny Deng herself had regretted it a long time ago. Especially when she saw how Jiu Yuqin was tortured before her death, she couldn't understand why Jiu Yuqin was treated so badly as Madam's daughter. If she wasn't her biological daughter, she was waiting outside when Madam gave birth to Jiu Yuqin. If Jiu Yuqin wasn't her biological daughter, she wouldn't believe it even if she saw it with her own eyes. Your Highness, I'm experienced and I've been serving Madam for a long time. If Madam didn't care about you, she wouldn't have sent me to take care of you. In Madam's heart, your ladyship's position is not something that can be replaced by anyone. This Lu Hui has sinister intentions. She clearly wants to sow discord between Nyang Nyang and Furen. If Nyang Nyang believes it, Then you have fallen for this lowly servant's scheme. I hope that Empress can be rational and not disappoint Furen and Prime Minister. Don't disappoint the people of Foam Country and His Majesty. After all, you're the queen of a country. Queen of a country? Nanny Deng heaved a sigh and left the room. Only Jiyu Yuyin was left standing there alone, thinking about what she had said before the end of the country. 2 streams of tears rolled down her cheeks. Jiyu Yuyin laughed at herself. Jiyu Yuqin didn't have much to be envious of, especially after she became the Empress. She knew that she wouldn't be able to stay on the Empress position for long. Sooner or later, she would roll down from the throne. However, during the 3 days that she was the Empress, she had to admit that she was quite envious. She was the Empress of the country and the person of tens of thousands of people. Now, all the glory belonged to her. The person standing at the top was her. All the officials worshipped her and the concubines respected her. Chapter 530. Even, she clenched her fists tightly and her ferocious face was full of hatred. Even the woman in the imperial study. The woman who was secretly locked in the secret room of the imperial study. He thought that she didn't know. He thought that he could protect her well. He thought that when she had covered the woman's face with nails, he had secretly used a woman with a similar figure to her to exchange for a fake skin and seized the opportunity to save her. He thought that she really didn't know anything. But she knew everything. She was willing to cooperate with him and play along with him because she loved him. She knew that he didn't want to do this, so she let him. She didn't want to force her man too hard because she knew that Jiyu Yuqin was already dead. There was no need for her to be so cruel to a dead person. She also knew that Jiyu Yuqin was her sister, her biological sister. She had bullied her since she was young and robbed her things. So what if she left her body intact after she died? It had been more than a month, almost 2 months. He had been guarding the imperial study every night. Even when she had begged him to stay, he had waited for her to fall asleep before heading back to the imperial study. He really thought that he did not know anything. After enduring for so long, why did she still have to endure it? Now even her mother was starting to regret. Why should she wait for them to regret, all of them regretting, but she still stood there and let them do whatever they wanted? Murong Yun regretted, and then wait for her father to regret. Feng Joqing regretted, and wait for the man she loved to abolish her empress position. Jiyu Yuyin staggered a few steps back. Yu Ying. The 2 words were squeezed out from between her teeth. Not long after, a figure flashed in front of her. A man in black with a cold face knelt respectfully in front of her. Jiyu Yuyin lowered her eyes and looked at the man in front of her. Will you betray me? The man's handsome and cold face was as cold as frost, but he still said respectfully, I will never betray Her Majesty. If one looked closely, it was not difficult to see the flash of pain in his eyes and the deep affection for the girl in the depths of his eyes. Unfortunately, the girl was immersed in her strong hatred and unwillingness, ignoring the man's expression. Perhaps, even if she knew, she would never take it to heart. A lowly slave who had been by her side since childhood was not worthy of her attention at all. To her, his adoration was like his entire being. It was so cheap that it made her feel humiliated. You're highly skilled in martial arts. Previously, you were the one who handled all my matters for me in secret. Today, I don't need you to do anything else. You only need to bring me to the imperial study and get rid of all the black-clothed secret guards that His Majesty planted outside the imperial study. Can you do that? Imperial study. Hearing these words, the man's gaze paused. There was no expression on his handsome face as he said respectfully, yes. Speaking of which, the matter of Jiyu Yuqin's corpse being hidden in the imperial study, as well as the matter of Jiyu Yuqin being swapped by Feng Joqing, was all told to her by Yu Ying. As for Yu Ying's existence, Feng Joqing only knew that he was her trusted bodyguard, but she did not know how strong this man's martial arts were, nor did she know who he only obeyed. Very good. My trust in you was not in vain. Now, follow me to the imperial study. Jiyu Yuqin, since you're already dead, why don't you die a little more thoroughly and completely disappear from this world? Why do you want to make life difficult for me? You haven't seen me, but I've seen you. I'm a maid of auspicious Harmony Palace. Her Majesty? The woman rolled her eyes. How can a lowly servant like you call the Empress by her name? Since you're a palace maid of auspicious Harmony Palace, what are you doing in Phoenix Perch Palace? Li Yingying blocked the entrance of the palace, not letting her in. That woman saw that she was so bold and dared to stop her from entering after knowing her identity. His expression immediately changed. Serving the sovereign king was a great honor. Anyone who heard of it would yearn to surpass and surpass it. It was something that many concubines could only dream of. But when Shen Yueji heard this, she suddenly smiled. Then your family's empress must not have told you that Ben Gong is still injured and can't serve in bed. The little palace maid smiled. The empress let Guifei Shen accompany his majesty not to serve him in bed. Today, such a big thing happened in the imperial harem, his majesty must have an unbearable headache. Since his majesty ascended to the throne, he has been suffering from headaches. During this period, it was always the empress who accompanied his majesty. Tonight, his majesty gave this opportunity to Guifei Niang Niang. Chapter 535. Oh! Then shouldn't Ben Gong thank Her Highness for her kindness? Where is his majesty now? Shen Yueji asked in a seemingly casual manner. Replying Her Highness, his majesty is still in the imperial study. Imperial study? Didn't she say that there was a trap? The four of them had their own thoughts. She just told Her Highness that his majesty was not in the imperial study, but this servant from Xianghe Palace actually said that his majesty was in the imperial study. Maybe this Jiyu Yuyin was doing something in the imperial study? If her concubine went, wouldn't she be falling into the trap she had set? Meeting Shen Yueji's gaze, Shuangshi coughed. All right, in any case, it's still early and your highness has just woken up, so you haven't eaten yet. This servant will go to the imperial kitchen and instruct the servants to make something for your highness to eat. We can also send some to your majesty. The little palace maid revealed a smug smile. I believe that Her Highness will be happy for His Majesty if she knows that Imperial Consort Shen cares so much about His Majesty. Oh, yes, Her Highness also asked this servant to pass a message to Imperial Consort Shen. Imperial Consort Shen is not feeling well and some errands should be done by the servants. At this moment, you should take good care of your injuries. When the wounds are healed, His Majesty should ask Imperial Consort Shen to serve him. Got it. When you go back, thank your Empress for her kindness. Ben Gong appreciates it. We are all family, so tell her not to be so polite. Shuangshi, send the guest off for Ben Gong. Yes, Her Highness. Her Highness, this servant just heard her say that His Majesty has a head disease. This seemingly casual question just happened to reveal how much Li Yingying cared about this matter. Shen Yueji glanced at her lightly. Yes, Ben Gong also just found out and Her Highness personally instructed it. It seems that there is a problem. However, during the time that Ben Gong and His Majesty have been together, I vaguely know a little, but His Majesty doesn't seem to want Ben Gong to know that he has a head disease. Then His Majesty didn't ask for an imperial physician? Hearing this, Shen Yueji suddenly smiled. For a moment, Li Yingying couldn't figure out her emotions from her smile and couldn't help but feel a little flustered. Yes, what was her status now? She was no longer the second-rank concubine Ru, the emperor's woman. He was even less qualified to ask about the emperor's affairs. But just now, she had crossed the line to ask her about the emperor's headache. You don't need to panic. I've already said that the emperor is an outstanding person that is rarely seen in this world. It's reasonable for you to be so worried about him. Moreover, you've been husband and wife for one night. However, from the look of the emperor, it seemed that he intended to keep it a secret. Moreover, imperial physicians are not immortals. Your Highness, Li Yingying said that you're resting. Shen Yueji didn't look at her. Instead, she continued to eat the melon seeds. You believe what she said? Of course not. The little scheme in her heart, this servant's heart, is clear. Hearing this, Shen Yueji pursed her lips and smiled. But Your Highness, what do you think the Empress is trying to do? If this servant hadn't heard from Jiao Gonggong that the emperor wasn't in the imperial study right now, this servant would have been fooled by the empress. At this time, she sent a maidservant to inform the imperial concubine that the emperor's headache had flared up again and was currently in the imperial study. The imperial concubine should accompany the emperor. With such a good opportunity, why wouldn't she fight for it? How could I possibly give this opportunity to Your Highness? That's right, Your Highness. What do you think that maidservant's identity is? Is she a servant of Seonghi Palace? Or is she a servant raised by a concubine in the bedchamber that was deliberately sent out to frame the empress? Chapter 537. Shin Yueji shook her head. She's a servant from Seonghi Palace. There's no mistake. As for why she doesn't look familiar, that's why Jiu Yuyin is pretending to be smart. Your Highness, this servant doesn't understand. Let's not talk about what the empress is thinking. Shin Yueji smiled faintly. Just from this servant girl that I've never seen before, when the matter is exposed, she can easily push the blame away. Since I've never seen this servant girl before, I only need to push the blame away and all the suspicions on me will be cleared. Just as you said, she's not a servant from Seonghi Palace, but a servant raised by a concubine in the inner palace. She was deliberately sent out to frame the empress. In this way, the empress not only gets rid of suspicion, but also becomes the biggest victim. With Shin Yueji's explanation, Double Happiness understood. So, Your Highness, the empress has set a big trap for Your Highness. Even if the matter is exposed, she can still pretend that she doesn't know this servant girl and won't admit that she is a servant girl of Seonghi Palace. At that time, if the matter is exposed, Nyang might not even be able to find that servant girl. If you insist that the empress is deliberately trying to embarrass the empress and cause trouble for the empress, after following me for so long, you've finally become smarter. You're right. So, this is the empress's cleverness. But she's pretending to be smart. To be honest, I've never taken her little tricks to heart. Then Your Highness, are you going to the imperial study or not? Let's not talk about what Jiu Yuyin is planning. Just based on the fact that His Majesty has a headache, Your Highness knows that. If what the Empress said is true, that His Majesty is really suffering from a headache in the imperial study right now, and the news gets out, you don't know how to love His Majesty. Even if this situation falls into His Majesty's ears, I'm afraid that His Majesty will also think so. Shin Yueji snorted coldly. Their mouths belong to them. They can say whatever they want. His Majesty is not the kind of person who can easily believe words. For his sake, this consort was willing to risk her life. Does he not know this in his heart? As for those concubines and servants who are gossiping and think that the trouble is not big enough, only the smart ones will keep quiet and obediently shut their mouths. Only those who have no sense of propriety and bite off more than they can chew will talk nonsense and dig their own graves. As for the imperial study, she sneered and kept him guessing. Someone has already gone there for me. Almost immediately, Double Happiness reacted. Your Highness, are you talking about Li Yingying? No wonder. She finally understood. No wonder she had a smile on her face just now. So that was what she was thinking. That's why Your Highness deliberately said that it was still early and that you wanted to rest first. Shall we go to the imperial study later to accompany His Majesty? If we don't do this, how can we give her the chance to be alone with His Majesty? Then Your Highness, aren't you afraid that if His Majesty is really there, Li Yingying will use some bewitching charm to seduce His Majesty? You can rest assured about this. His Majesty is not the kind of person who is obsessed with beauty. As an emperor, if he is seduced by beauty, how can he be a good emperor? Coincidentally, she knew Feng Joqing. In this man's heart, the country were far more important than the beauty. No matter how beautiful the beauty was, in front of him, compared to the country, it was not worth mentioning. Chapter 538. Your Highness is right. This Li Yingying is not a beauty that can cause the downfall of a city. Among all the beauties in the palace, any one of them is much better than her. But Your Highness, didn't you notice that she looked similar to the late Empress? And this servant saw the Emperor's attitude. He liked her for a while, but didn't like her for a while. For your highness, he didn't even look at her. But this servant doesn't understand. Since he didn't like her, why did he spoil her? After spoiling her. Suddenly, she jumped up. Shun Yueji was even more shocked by her reaction. What are you doing? Did you see a ghost? Niang Niang, this servant suddenly thought of something. You said that the Empress wanted you to go to the Imperial study, but in the end, you didn't go and Li Yingying went instead. I don't know what she's scheming behind the scenes. If Niang Niang switched to Li Yingying, would Li Yingying die? Didn't your highness say that Li Yingying would be useful in the future? Then your highness, do you want Li Yingying to die now? Shun Yueji held her forehead, feeling a headache coming on. Of course, she can't die now. I am a person who keeps promises. Since I promised her before that I would avenge her, how can I let her die so easily before helping her fulfill her promise? Then what? Li Yingying definitely won't go to Huayang Palace. She will definitely bring the plate of pastries to the Imperial study. Coincidentally, the Emperor might be in Huayang Palace right now. Go to Huayang Palace and say that the Empress wants this consort to accompany the Emperor in the Imperial study. This consort is very anxious, so let Li Yingying go first. This consort is changing my dressing. I'll come after I'm done. Yes, Your Highness. Shuang she didn't dare to hesitate. After responding, he left respectfully. Shun Yueji also got up, planning to change her clothes first. Since she said it was to change her dressing, she should change her clothes too. Otherwise, she would smell like medicine. However, as soon as she entered the inner hall, she saw the man she didn't want to see lying on her bed, looking at her with a flirtatious expression. Her face darkened. She walked past him. Did I offend you in my previous life? Why are you so persistent? Little beauty, I don't like what you're saying. What do you mean I'm haunting you? Little beauty? Shun Yueji sneered and looked at him. I'm Mo Wushang's woman. If he finds out that you call me that, do you think he'll cripple you? I thought you were better than that guy, but now I realize that you're just like that wild man. You're not likable at all. Even if I'm likable, it's not your turn to like me. Shun Yueji glanced at him indifferently. Tell me, why did you suddenly come to my place? Nothing much. It's just that a certain fellow entrusted me with a task before he left. I've just found some clues, so I came over to ask for credit. What a pity. Without waiting for the man to speak, she took the initiative to say, "It's cold again, isn't it?" Knowing that she had seen through his intentions from the very beginning, Hong Fui put the teacup on the table and glanced at her uninterestedly. You are really boring. He originally planned to tease her, but after what she did, he couldn't be bothered to tease her anymore. Massage my legs. If I'm happy, I'll tell you. Shun Yueji leaned over and moved a round chair towards his legs. Hong Fui was shocked and quickly jumped away. His eyes widened. Shun Yueji. Now that she learned from Hong Fui that the female corpse in the secret chamber was really her, she had mixed feelings. She did not understand what Feng Zhouqing meant by doing this. How do you know that the body of the late empress is in his secret chamber? In a place like the Imperial Palace, I can come and go as I please. Coincidentally, I like to do exciting things. From the moment Feng Zhouqing locked her up in the secret chamber, I already knew who the corpse in there belonged to. You mean? I just don't know why that guy didn't do anything when he knew that the body in the secret chamber was Jiyu Yueqin's. According to his style, even if it was a body, I'm afraid that he would have snatched her from Feng Zhouqing. I was afraid that he would do something serious if he was too excited. Read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine, The Regent, Messing with the Body Claw book house for free. Chapter 542. What is the other thing? What other thing? Hong Fui, don't pretend to be confused. You obviously know what I am asking you about. Oh. The man dragged out a long sound, calmly raised his eyebrows and looked at her. That one. How is the investigation going? What is the identity of the mysterious woman behind Ru-Er? How did you know that I was going to tell you this? To be honest, when he heard Shen Yueji's question, Hong Fui was quite surprised. He said that he had something to tell Shen Yueji, but he did not mention this. How could she guess it? Looking at his strange expression, Shen Yueji snorted. Before Mo Wushang left, I specifically asked him to help me investigate this matter. He cares about me so much, so he must have put my matter first. Speaking of this, she was quite proud. Coincidentally, he asked you to stay. One of the reasons was to protect me, and the other was to help investigate the mysterious woman, right? You're smart. It seems that you're not without some redeeming qualities. Forget it, since you have already guessed it, I will not keep you in suspense. I did find out a little about the identity of the mysterious woman behind Lu Qingru, but unfortunately. Unfortunately what? Don't worry, Lu Qingru really did not lie to you. That woman does have some background, as if she knew that I was going to investigate her, so she was already on guard. Did you see her? The man touched his nose. You can say that. In the beginning, he was following behind the woman. He boasted about his Qinggong and thought that he could secretly follow the woman and find out some information about her. Who knew that this woman was really smart? It was as if she knew that he was secretly following her. She played the game of the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind it. Not only did he fail to follow her, but he was also almost plotted against by the villain behind him. Looking at the man's embarrassed expression, Shen Yueji vaguely guessed something. After all this time, you were plotted against by that woman? Fat. What nonsense are you talking about? Only I can plot against others, and no one else can plot against me. Did you find out where that woman came from? I don't know about your Feng Nation's matters, but I'm very clear about my North Sea's matters. There used to be a mysterious organization in the northern underworld. It was said that it had been passed down for nearly 100 years. Oh! I already knew who that woman was, but the man who fought with me afterward, I can confirm that he was from the Dark North Kingdom. Moreover, it was the Xianming cult that had been rumored in the Jianghu for a long time. It was rumored that the mysterious dark sect had an evil technique that could divide a person's body into different shapes and appearances. When I was fighting with that man, he suddenly transformed into 6 different figures. Even the real person disappeared among the 6 figures, making it difficult to distinguish between the real and the fake. You're from the Northern Dark Kingdom? Shen Yueji was confused. If they are from the North Underworld, why would they come to the Feng Nation? How would I know? However, the black-clothed man's martial arts and moves were indeed the methods that the Northern Underworld Xianming sect used. It was rumored that the Xianming sect was mysterious and liked to cover their faces with veils. No one has ever seen their true faces. Baiduan. Sooner or later, I will find out Lu Qingrou's identity. It wasn't just to help Shen Yueji. Hong Fui suddenly realized that he seemed to be quite interested in that person from the Huayang Palace. This woman was really not simple. No wonder she could hold the appetite of so many men. Even when he found out about it, he originally planned to be a guest behind the curtain. In the end, he gave up on the idea. He did not want to have a direct conflict with Feng Jiuqing, this meticulous emperor, for the time being. Read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine, The Regent, Messing with the Body Claw Book House for free. Chapter 544. The Imperial Studily Yingying didn't see the guards outside. Originally, she was thinking about what reason to go in, but when she saw that it was as quiet as before, she couldn't help feeling happy. Holding the plate of pastries, she carefully pushed open the door to the Imperial study. Before she came, she specially went back to her residence and changed into a beautiful dress. The clothes of palace maids were all the same. When she was concubine Ying, she also had a few beautiful clothes, but not many. In just a few days, she rushed them out. After she was demoted by the emperor, those gorgeous clothes were also taken away. She lowered her head and looked at the white dress she was wearing. It was simple and elegant. She didn't put much makeup on her face because Shinyueji once said that the emperor didn't like women with heavy makeup. In addition, the former empress was a beautiful person. She was somewhat similar to the former empress. The less makeup she put on, the more she looked like her. The moment she pushed open the door, Li Yingying panicked. Her heart almost jumped out of her chest. At this moment, she and the emperor were only separated by a door. After this door was opened, she could see the emperor she yearned for day and night. Speaking of which, she hadn't seen him for more than a day, but she felt that a long time had passed. From when he was an imperial concubine to when he was demoted, she thought that there would be no connection between them. Since she was young, she had lived in hatred. She didn't know the taste of love between a man and a woman, let alone the taste of liking someone. She also didn't know why her mother fell in love with that beast in human clothing without any regrets. She couldn't understand what was so good about that man that made her mother dig out her heart and lungs to be with him. Even if he treated her so cruelly, she still loved him without any regrets. Now, Li Yingying finally knew this feeling. This feeling was really wonderful. If one didn't truly love someone, they would never know this feeling and experience this kind of feeling. She treated the emperor like this. As long as she thought that if she could stay by his side forever, even if she died, she wouldn't have any regrets. Even if for him, she had to give up some things and become enemies with the whole world. She would also give up everything and abandon everything for him. Perhaps, this was the feeling of loving someone. This was also the reason why her mother loved that man so firmly in the past. Li Yingying felt like there was a heavy rock pressing down on her feet. She carefully pushed the door open, not daring to look inside. She carefully pushed the door open, lowered her head, and took small steps forward. The imperial study was very quiet. It was her first time coming to this kind of place. She thought to herself, perhaps this was where the emperor worked. It was so quiet, and there was an invisible majesty to it. She could not hear any sound, but according to the palace maid, there must be someone in the imperial study. Your Majesty, this servant heard that your headache is acting up again. This servant's heart is not good, so I came to have a look. She was afraid that she was too obvious, so she hurriedly changed her words. It was imperial concubine who asked this servant to come first. She said that it was still early, and she was worried that I would disturb your Majesty's work, so she asked this servant to come to see your Majesty first, to see if your Majesty is all right. Speaking of this, she carefully raised her head with a happy expression. However, the moment she raised her head, she could no longer smile, because she didn't see the man she wanted to see. Right in front of her, lay a woman whose limbs had been amputated quietly. Baidwan read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine, the Prince Regent, provoking the Body Claw Book House for free. Then this one. She looked at the woman who was lying there quietly as if she was asleep. If she hadn't known that she had been dead for a long time, if she hadn't known that her 5 limbs had been dismembered, she would have thought that she had fallen asleep. She slept so quietly, so calmly, like a pale beauty in a painting. No one could bear to disturb her. She was the late empress, but Li Yingying could finally move. She staggered back a little, but her eyes were still fixed on the female corpse in front of her. Wasn't she already submerged in the lake? The body sank in South Lake, and its face was covered with countless nails. It was reasonable to say that her body should be in South Lake. Read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine, the Regent, Messing with Claw Book House for free. Chapter 547. She could clearly see that on the corpse, there were dents and messy stitches. Each of her arms was stitched up with a needle and thread, hanging down. Her head was crooked, swaying as she walked towards her. Even the silver thread couldn't stitch up her swaying head. She saw with her own eyes that Jiu Yuechin's head, from the back, fell to the front as she walked forward, spinning in front of her chest. She also saw with her own eyes that her head, from the front, fell to the right, then to the left. Her eyes looked as if they had been scalded. There was only black without any white edges. Her mouth was slightly open, But there was no tongue inside. Countless worms crawled out of her mouth and fell to the ground. The worms crawled very quickly, even faster than she walked. After they fell to the ground, they all crawled towards her one after another. Li Yingying was so scared that she almost lost her voice. She took out a wooden board from somewhere and slapped the worms with all her might. The worms seemed endless, and no matter how much strength she exerted, the flattened worms would only lie on the ground for a while before coming back to life. Li Yingying cried as she watched the worms crawling towards her body. She dodged and ran in all directions. And from Jiu Yuechin's mouth, there were even more worms crawling out. Li Yingying was really scared, so scared that she didn't know what to do. She could only focus her attention on Jiu Yuechin. She didn't care who she was, didn't care if she offended her, and didn't know why she was here. She only knew that she was scared. If she didn't retaliate, she would be the one to die. She didn't want to die, she wanted revenge. She didn't want to die for no reason. She grabbed the wooden board in her hands and suddenly pounced towards her corpse. I don't care if you're a human or a ghost, I don't think I've offended you, but you want to kill me, I'll kill you. Li Yingying smashed the wooden plank on the top of the female corpse's head. Immediately, a large hole appeared on the top of the female corpse's head. After all, she had been dead for a long time. The structure of her body was destined to be inferior to that of a living person. Even if it was a light blow, her rotting body would split open. Moreover, Li Yingying smashed the wooden plank with such force. Then, Li Yingying saw a slit in Jiu Yuechin's brain, from which she could vaguely see the rotting organs. It was disgusting and terrifying. She was so scared that she immediately let go of the wooden board in her hands and kept retreating. How could this be? How could this be? It really was the late Empress. She was now certain that it was the late Empress. She was clearly dead and there were no signs of life in her body. Why? Why could she still stand up? Why could she still attack her? While Li Yingying was in a daze, Jiu Yuechin suddenly stretched out her hands. Her fingers were so cold that they seemed to have just come out from an ice coffin. It was so cold that it could freeze people. The suffocating pain made Li Yingying's face pale. She started to struggle with all her might. But how could her weak strength compare to a dead person? Even a living person would know that her blows and bites would cause pain. Chapter 548. However, the woman in front of her was a dead person. She had been dead for a long time and her body had long since decayed. She couldn't laugh, feel pain, or feel pain. No matter how hard she tried, how hard she struggled, she would not have any reaction. She just wanted to kill her. This was the first time Li Yingying sized up a dead person at such a close distance. She could finally understand why people weren't afraid of anyone when they were alive, but when they died, even their loved ones would feel fear. It was because the appearance of a dead person was really terrifying. She was the opposite of everything when she was alive. Her eyeballs were all black, she didn't have a tongue, nothing at all. It was so terrifying. Her whole body seemed to be wrapped in a layer of ice. The coldness from her whole body made her feel the chill penetrating her limbs and bones. It was so horrifying. Sob, sob, sob. She wanted to struggle and ask for help, but the sound that came out was bursts of sobs. It was as if her throat was being choked. The strength and range of her struggle slowly decreased, and even her vision began to blur. Li Yingying thought that she was going to die. She planned to quietly welcome the arrival of death, but, when she really gave up struggling and was ready to accept her fate, the strength that was choking her neck suddenly decreased a lot. She took this opportunity and finally broke free from her hand. She saw Jiu Yuechin stagger a few steps back. The dismembered body that seemed to be hanging on her body swayed left and right. The head that had finally stood on her neck fell again, and the silver thread pulled a long distance. She couldn't care about anything else. She clenched her last breath of strength, picked up the board that she had just thrown away from the ground, and smashed it hard on her. Whether it was her head or her body, she seemed to have gone crazy, smashing and kicking with all her strength. There were traces of wetness on her hands. She lowered her head and saw that it was blood, red blood. The dark red blood almost stung her eyes. What she knew today was the first time in her life. Shock, fear, doubt, horror, and all kinds of emotions were mixed together. Why would a dead person bleed? The blood was warm and bright red, just like the blood of a living person. But clearly, she was clearly dead. She was clearly dead. Li Yingying crawled up from Jiu Yueqin's body in a panic. She could no longer move, her body lying there softly, as though she had fallen asleep. If it wasn't for the wounds on her body, if it wasn't for her 5 intact limbs returning to her neck and head, everything would have been fine. It wouldn't have been like what she saw when she came in, her limbs dismembered, but now, she was clearly fine. Her arms and legs were all there, her head was all right, and she looked like she was asleep. Her eyes were closed, and her eyeballs could not be seen. Her little mouth also slowly closed, and she was no longer the crippled her. She was still holding the stick in her hand, and the stick was stained with her blood. For a moment, Li Yingying stood there. There was nothing more difficult for her to digest than being intact. It was like a dream. The scene just now was her illusion. It was all her illusion. Jiu Yueqin's body wasn't dismembered, and everything about her was fine. Just like how she didn't get up to attack her just now, it was all because of her. It was everything that she imagined because of fear, and she hit her without caring. Read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine, The Regent, Messing with Clawbook House for free. In his eyes were filled with satisfaction, and he only followed her. It wasn't the kind of gentleness that was fake and perfunctory, nor was it the kind of gentleness that was faked. This was how he should be. He was so infatuated with a woman. It was unlike him to be infatuated and affectionate. It turned out, this was the most infatuated scene of the emperor. Read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine, The Regent, Messing with Clawbook House for free. When did the handsome and gentle man in her impression become like this? Cold and emotionless, without the slightest bit of emotion. He even used such an indifferent tone to speak to her, saying such cruel words, wanting to kill her. "Your Majesty," Li Yingying cried out. She struggled to get up from the ground and wanted to scratch the corner of the emperor's clothes. "Your Majesty, please listen to this servant's explanation. It's really not what you see. It was the late empress who attacked this servant first. She's alive, and she wants to kill this servant. This servant fought back because I struggled and resisted. If this servant didn't fight back, then this servant would be the one who died, Your Majesty. China wants your life, so you obediently give it to her. Who allowed you to hurt her?" Baiduan read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine, The Prince Regent, Messing with Clawbook House for free. Chapter 551. The man's gaze towards her was filled with bone-piercing killing intent. Li Yingying was shocked and didn't say anything for a long time. Seeing that Qiu Yang was really going to pull her away, she resisted with all her might. "Your Majesty, this servant was framed. Your Majesty, why don't you think about why this servant suddenly appeared here? Someone must have framed this servant, Your Majesty. This servant didn't see the late empress like this just now. Her limbs were all chopped off. Her hands, legs, and head were all sewn back together with a needle and thread. At that time, her head was almost hanging on the ground, and she didn't have a tongue. A lot of worms came out of her mouth. Your Majesty," Li Yingying cried out bitterly. "This servant dares to swear that this servant had no grudge with the late empress. Why would she hurt her? Your Majesty, this servant really doesn't know what happened. It was this servant from the Empress's palace who said that Your Majesty's illness had flared up and asked Imperial Consort Niang to come and visit Your Majesty. Imperial Consort Niang's body was unwell, so she had to come later. This servant was worried that Your Majesty wouldn't be able to handle it, so I made the decision to come to the Imperial study on my own accord. Your Majesty, this servant has been wrongly accused. You must be clear about this. Your Majesty. If Your Majesty doesn't believe me, you can summon Imperial Consort Nyang. Come, Imperial Consort Nyang will definitely clear this servant's name. Your Majesty, there is a reason for this. I hope Your Majesty." Compared to Feng Jiuqing's unreasonable behavior, Qiu Yang was much calmer. Not to mention the fact that Li Yingying was a weak girl who did not know martial arts, there were so many embroidered uniform hidden guards in the imperial study. It was impossible for them to let her in so openly. When he and the emperor received the news from the Phoenix Perch Palace, they hurried over to the imperial study. Not only were they unable to find any traces of the dark guards, it seemed like Li Yingying was the only one left in the huge imperial study. This woman had no status or background, so it was impossible for her to be so capable. Maybe it was as she said, that she was framed. As for the person who framed her, he heard her mention the late empress. Qiu Yang looked at the ugly expression on the emperor's face, since this maid said that she was a palace maid in the empress quarters and said that Your Majesty has a head disease, then this matter should have come from Xionghe Palace. Your Majesty, this Li Yingying is by Guifei's side, what? How can we not punish the maidservants by her side? Emperor? The red-eyed emperor seemed to only have one person in his eyes. Qiu Yang knew that even if he brought up Shen Yueji now, it would be useless. Under the emperor's icy gaze, he did not dare to hesitate and went forward to pull Li Yingying up. Your Majesty, spare me, spare me. She was pressed outside the imperial study by two black-clothed secret guards. The cold wind blew against her face, but the coldness of the cold wind was far less than the sharp dagger in the secret guard's hand. This knife would cut her body again and again. There was nothing more painful and unbearable than personally experiencing his flesh being shaved off piece by piece. Li Yingying's face was full of fear. Before she could react, she felt a pain in her right arm. A large piece of flesh had been shaved off along with her arm. She thought that her scream would more or less make the young emperor feel a little compassion. However, she saw him carefully holding the woman who had been dead for a long time in his arms and stroking her pale cheeks with his big palms. He cherished and cared about her so much and was reluctant to let her go. Read the latest chapter of Exploding Cute Pet Concubine, The Regent, Gets into Trouble with Clawbook House for free. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.